Very warm welcome to my YouTube channel today. We're taking a look at the former RAF Bolt Head. We're here at on the grass strip that's used by light aircraft, which is now been established on one side of the Wartime Runway. It's a fairly murky day, but I thought we'd take off, have a look around at the aerodrome from above, and I can relay to you the experience that a Wellington Bomber had here in 1946. Bearing in mind the aerodrome had been closed for approximately a year. It closed in 1945, but had been kept under care and maintenance, and on the 1st of May 1946 a Wellington Bomber was on a long-range navigational exercise from RAF Shawbury in Shropshire, and the port engine of this particular Wellington failed in flight, and the pilot elected to make an emergency diversion to RAF Bolt Head, and he attempted to make a single engine landing, flying on the power of the starboard engine alone, but however, due to the urgency of the whole situation, the pilot failed to allow sufficient time for the undercarriage to lower and to lock. So immediately on touchdown, the still unlocked and partially lowered undercarriage collapsed, and unfortunately the aircraft slid on its belly along the runway, came to a grinding halt. The aircraft was a complete write-off. It was categorised as damaged beyond repair, but the crew of 4 were completely uninjured. Now, as you can see on this particular day today, it's a fairly murky day. We've only got a cloud base of around about 400 feet, and as we fly over Bolt Head itself now and turn to fly down parallel to the aerodrome, and you'll see off to one side the runway that we took off from, just over there in the distance. Salcombe's over there to the right. This is the Wartime Runway as it was in 1943, and we'll fly down one side, have a look around at the other end, and then come into land. You can see that the runway over there in the distance, it begins to rain as we get down this end, so we'll turn and make a fairly sharpish landing. But as part of the film today, I'm going to take a look at the involvement of Sir Barnes Wallis, who was very much involved with the development of the design of the Wellington Bomber. He was also more famous for designing the bouncing bomb that was part of 617 Squadron's attack on the German dams. We'll also take a look at the aircraft that Glenn Miller disappeared in over the English Channel back in 1944, and just take a general look at the Wellington aircraft, because I think it's interesting and worthwhile to remember that these aircraft, the Wellington Bomber, was still operational and still flying in 1946, and in fact they kept on. They were kept operational up until around about 1953, and the last Wellington Bomber flew in 1955, and there now remains a Wellington Bomber at Brooklands Museum, which was retrieved from a lock in Scotland. But quite an incredible aircraft. In its early days it was powered by 2 Bristol Pegasus engines, and latterly they installed the Bristol Hercules engine, which was slightly more powerful. It could cruise at around about 235 miles an hour, and had a range of up to about 2,000 miles. It was a very versatile aircraft, and very much loved by all its crew.
When it returns from one operation, in order to prepare it for the next, with particular reference to the armourer's duties. On landing, the pilot will first taxi his aeroplane to its dispersal point. Dispersal is the name given to the system of keeping aircraft and other equipment spread about the aerodrome so as to offer no concentrated target to the enemy. Having parked their machine, the crew go off in search of well-earned rest and refreshment, and to make their report to the intelligence officer. As soon after dawn, as may be determined by the needs of the moment, the ground crew begin their task of preparing the aeroplane for its next operation. First on the scene is the Refueling Squad, for all aircraft must be kept with tanks full, ready to take the air as quickly as possible in case of emergency. Furthermore, a supply of fuel and oil will be needed for test purposes. Any bombs which may not have been used are removed by the armourers, and in accordance with the schedule of whatever inspection is due, fitters examine the engines and make any adjustments, repairs or renewals which may be necessary. Riggers go over the bodywork looking for signs of wear, oiling working parts, seeing that hydraulic reservoirs are topped up and systems are free, and also searching for any damage caused by enemy fire. Or overhaul, the aircrew concerned take over for the test flight. During the test flight, which lasts some 20 minutes, engines, radio, guns, controls, bomb release gear and other parts are subjected to a working test.
We're back at Salcombe now. We're making an approach to the former RAF Bolt Head. I thought it'd be interesting to show you what the view would have been like for an aircraft coming into land. It was the Wellington was fairly capable of landing on such a runway, and as we come in now, there's Salcombe Harbour off to our right. Bearing in mind this is a fairly clear sunny day, the weather on the day can change quite radically, as you saw in the introduction of the film, when we only had 500-foot cloud base, so this view would have been slightly different in that case. But we're approaching the cliff here, and the Wartime Runway begins just over that tree line and then runs, as you can see, for around about 1,200 metres, just over, maybe slightly over. It runs all the way down to Esau car park. The runway was coconut matting, and then the Summerfield tracking was built on top of it, but it was a very, very versatile and capable runway to land on. And so we make an approach now. We're just coming over where the runway started. As you can see down below, this is 1940, 1943. We're coming in from the right hand side there, and we'll make an approach now. We're coming in and we'll be looking to set down. So a Wellington Bomber just on one single engine would be quite would be a little bit of a handful, because twin engine aircraft with just one of the engines going can be quite difficult to handle. So the pilot had got the undercarriage down, but he hadn't got it locked. So at this point he made a landing. The undercarriage collapsed, and they slid to a halt at the other end of the runway, just down here. Thankfully the crew were uninjured, and we'll now go on and hope you enjoy the rest of the film. All the best.
Using the same principle of construction, metal interwoven like basket work, he went on to design the Wellesley and the Wellington Bomber, that most successful maid of all work, the only bomber to be in action for all the 6 years of the war. His work on the Wellington was finished before war broke out. From the Wellesley grew the Wellington, and again the Air Ministry was sceptical. Indeed, the RAF would have been in a sorry state at the beginning of the war if Vickers Aviation, the company from which grew Wallis's Wellington and Mitchell's Spitfire, had not been under the control of the far-sighted Sir Robert Maclean. Soon the Wellington proved that it could fly twice as far with twice the weight of bombs as the Air Ministry's specification. And it was immensely strong. Half shot away, it would still bring its crew safely home. Many pilots owed their lives to Sir Robert Maclean's encouragement of Wallis. The Wellington played many roles. This apparatus was used by Coastal Command to explode mines. In all, 11,000 Wellingtons were built, and it served in every theatre of the war. Its success meant that Barnes Wallis, who produced the structure, and R.K. Pierson, who produced the aerodynamics, were uncharacteristically idle.
The Wellington proved to be such a success that our works were full up with work, and Pierson and I had nothing else to go on with. We shouldn't have been allowed to put it into the shops if we had. So I was just at liberty to think of what I wanted, and I thought of what would be an engineer's way of stopping the war, and that would be to cut off the power supply to their great armament factories in the Ruhr, which involved bombing the dams, destroying the dams, because, you know, it takes 150 tons of water to make 1 ton of steel. And if we robbed them of all their water supply, they couldn't produce steel, and the war would have come to an end.
This was in what year, then?
39.
Well, why didn't anybody take up the idea, then?
Nobody believed in it. Nobody thought it possible.
Except Barnes Wallis. He wrote a paper, a method of attacking the Axis powers, and at the top he quoted Thomas Hardy. Experience is as to intensity and not as to duration. He adopted a novel way of getting his idea known.
Well, I circulated quite unofficially 100 copies, a number of which went to America because I refused to accept defeat, and to the horror of the security forces in the government when they learnt of it. But they came back a week later and said, by Jove, this is the best form of security that we can imagine, because if the government have allowed you to publicize this idea, it must prove automatically that it won't work. You get quite a lot of quiet humor, you know, in moments such as this.
Tests showed that the massive dams were not even tickled by his first idea, a huge earthquake bomb. But now, distilled out of argument between Barnes Wallis and his research team, came another idea.
The only thing to do was to make something which hopped. So I made something which hopped. We made a whole lot of variously shaped balls, and we fired them from a catapult in the tank at Teddington, and we found that given the proper relation between spin about a horizontal axis and the surface, that they would run on the surface of the water. And this ball, the weight of which you may judge, I have made run 500 or 600 feet up the long tank at Teddington, just kissing the water. It goes until...
At some aerodromes, maintenance of aircraft guns is carried out by armourers, at others by the air gunners themselves. Guns are cleaned daily, the recoiling portions being withdrawn for this purpose. First, the gunner detaches the hydraulic control to the gun sear. He removes the back plate. For this purpose, he trains the sight and guns onto a reduced scale sighting board. First, he trains the turret on the sighting spot on the board, and then checks the alignment of the guns on their respective right and left-hand spots by looking through the barrels and the sight. Meanwhile, in the ammunition filling room, machine gun belts are being prepared by means of the belt filling machine. This automatically inserts the rounds into metal links and roughly positions them. The rounds are put into a hopper in the proportion of different types of ammunition required for the operation in question, that is, day or night. These will consist of ball, armor-piercing, and incendiary. In order to apply the tracer firing principle, a percentage of tracer ammunition is put into the belt, accurately spaced every so many rounds, approximately 1 to 5 of other types of ammunition, as can be seen here. The actual percentage of tracer depends on the number of guns and the individual turret installation. The gunner now carefully transfers the belts to the ammunition tanks in the turret. When the tanks are full, he threads the ammunition by means of a toggle through the ammunition chutes into the feed block of the gun, ready for loading. The aeroplane having been subjected to the appropriate degree of inspection or overhaul, the aircrew concerned take over for the test flight.
And here's a lovely shot of a Wellington, unusual version, air-sea rescue boat, clearly seen slung underneath, of quite a size. That would be dropped to anyone in trouble in the sea. And there's a Norseman, the very type Glenn Miller disappeared in. Note how small it is.
Well, thank you very much for sticking with it this far, and I hope you've enjoyed the film. It was certainly very interesting to put together the facts about the Wellington Bomber, the last aircraft to land at RAF Bolt Head in 1946. Have a think about subscribing, it'd be appreciated, and take a look at my Patreon channel, my Patreon page, and take the greatest of care. All the very best. Cheers for now.